Hey, it's Debbie, Friday Night Live. I am doing a federal version. I'm sorry that I'm late. I wasn't paying attention to the clock. So it is actually 6:05, 5 minutes late. Tonight, what I want to talk to you about is the High-3 average salary. And again, it's specifically for federal employees. When we talk about our retirement benefits, and we can call those our pension, our annuity, our CSRS, our FERS, there's all kinds of different names for that. But that retirement is based upon our creditable length of service multiplied by our High-3 average salary multiplied by a formula. So the creditable service, very simplistically, can be our civilian time, our military deposited time, and our sick leave all added together. The formula will depend on whether I am CSRS or FERS, special provisions or not, whether I go on a disability or I don't. So those will both change. And I'm not going to get into those tonight. I've been doing some long streams recently, so I'm going to try tonight to stick to my rule, which is 15 to 20 minutes. But in between that creditable service and that formula, we do have the High-3 average salary. And there's a lot of misunderstanding from federal employees when we start talking about this. Number one, a lot of people think that it's their last 3 years of earnings. It's not uncommon at all. You hear people talking all the time about their last 3 years, whatever. Those of us who work in human resources will normally let you do that. When we hear you talk about your last three, because normally it is the last 3 years that you are making the most money, but it doesn't say last three, does it? It says High-3. So in fact, it is the highest 3 consecutive years when I'm making the most basic pay. Hey Tiff, great to see you. It's any consecutive. So that word's super important, right? It's got to be back to back. It's any consecutive 3-year period when I was making the most basic pay. Normally it's the last three because you've had step increases, you've had cost of living adjustments, you've had promotions, and pretty typically you're making more money in the last 3 years that you work. But again, that's not true for everybody, and it doesn't have to be in your last 3 years. It can be any 3 consecutive years within your federal employment. The other thing that I have to explain to people when we talk about this is not only is it necessarily the last three, yes, usually, but not always, but it's also basic pay that we're looking for. Basic. A lot of people hear base when I say that, but I didn't say base, and they're not the same. Basic is all of the pay that is set by law or regulation, therefore subject to retirement contribution. So in the classroom, I like to teach this 3 different ways. Simplistically, so people can figure it out for themselves. Technically, we look at the regulation together and go through a list. Factually, I show you how human resources calculates the High-3 average salary for you. And so all 3 ways are super important, right? Simplistically, what's important? The words. It's the High-3, and it is basic pay. All of the pay set by law or regulation and therefore subject to retirement contribution. What does that mean? It means the stuff that you get every single 2 weeks, no matter what. So simplistically, and there'll be some exceptions to that in just a minute, but simplistically, if I'm trying to figure it out, then what do? I look at this pay and I ask one question. How often do I get this? If I get it every 2 weeks, it normally is going to count. Again, there's some exceptions we'll have to talk about, but if I get it every 2 weeks, it's normally going to count. If I look at it and I ask, how often do I get it? And the answer is, only when I do this, only if I do that, only something, then no. No, it isn't part of the basic pay, and no, it isn't going to be included in the High-3 average salary. So that's the easiest way to figure it out. Tiffany's asking, is overseas allowance, LQA, and COLA part of the amounts that calculate in the basic pay? They aren't, Tiff. They are not. And that's a really big misunderstanding by a lot of people because CONUS locality is included. OCONUS, COLA, and all of the allowances for being in that overseas environment is not included. So I'm so glad you asked that question because there is a lot of misunderstanding with that. Okay, simplistically, it's the stuff I get every 2 weeks, but then I said there's a couple of exceptions. Okay, so I've got some slides to show you tonight. The first one that's up there is what's included. So we're moving to the technical perspective and we're just looking at the OPM regulation to see what is going to count in my High-3. Locality, yes. Again, the overseas stuff, no, but locality does get included. And that's the biggest question I get from folks. But I think it is because so many people equate basic to base. I think that's the problem. Shift differential can count, excuse me, but only if somebody is in the wage system. So within the federal government, we have two main categories of workers. We have something called general schedule, or GS, and we have something called the wage system. And then we have a number of banded systems which came from GS. So GS and the banded systems are annual salaries. The wage system, which includes wage grade, wage leader, wage supervisor, those folks are paid an hourly wage. If I'm a WG, WL, or WS, shift differential is included in my High-3. If I'm a GS or in a banded system, my shift differential, if I'm working evening or nights, is not included in my High-3 average salary. Premium pay for standby time. This is very rare, and largely it applies to Department of Defense firefighters who are working shifts that are more than 40 hours in the week, more than 80 hours in the biweekly pay period. And I'll show you how we're going to compute it for those DoD firefighters in just a minute. If you are a firefighter that works for the Bureau of Land Management or the U.S. Forest Service, you're working 40 hours a week, then this doesn't apply to you. Again, this is an exception to the normal rules. Law enforcement availability pay, or LEAP, and also unscheduled overtime for law enforcement officers does count towards the High-3 average salary, but only for those folks. Special pay for recruitment and retention, I like to tell people, may or may not count. It really depends on how you are paid that recruitment or retention incentive. So, for example, I've applied for a federal job. This agency wants to hire me, and I'm bringing a lot of skills to the table. So they really want me to accept this job, and they offer me a recruiting incentive. That can be paid a couple of different ways. Sometimes we give a person a bonus. Now, if I go back to simplistically trying to figure out, hey, does this time count? What's the question? The question is, how often do I get this money? We don't get a bonus every 2 weeks, right? That would be really cool, but it doesn't happen that way. So bonuses, no. But sometimes we'll hire a person and we'll adjust their steps upon that initial hiring. And so they're not going to start at step 1. They're going to start at 2 or 3 or 5 or 10. That's part of their biweekly pay period, or that biweekly pay. That is what I'm talking about when I say those incentives count. Step increases, increases in the band, but not a bonus, not a lump sum payment, even if that's spread out maybe over a period of time. Customs and Border Protection officers do get to include up to half of the annual overtime rate. Again, very few people get to do that, but our customs officers do. And Title 38 physicians and dentists that work for the Department of Veterans Affairs get to include their performance pay in their High-3 average salary. So those are the inclusions. And then the next slide is talking about the exclusions. Any kind of lump sum payment that you receive. So maybe you've decided to leave the government and you've got some annual leave on the books. That's going to be cashed out. You're going to receive that in a lump sum payment. Won't count towards your High-3. Bonuses, no. Cash awards, no. Those are not going to count. Overtime, no. Again, some exceptions for our law enforcement officers and for our Customs and Border Protection officers, but other people don't get credit for that. Cash awards we already talked about. Holiday pay, Sunday premium pay, if I receive that, it's not going to count. Supplemental money that I'm getting from workers' comp is not going to count. Any kind of military pay is not going to count. That's not to say, if you are a member of a reserve component of the military and you're also a federal civilian and you're being activated and you're using military leave does count. just like annual leave does, just like sick leave does. That's just a leave category. There's nothing special you have to do. I'm talking about money that you get from the military. That's not going to be included in the High-3 average salary calculation. Foreign post differential, no, we've already talked about that. Shift differential for anybody that's not a WG, WL, or WS isn't going to count in this. Performance pay for those Title 38 physicians and dentists isn't going to be included in this. So even though, I can give you the list and talk about it, there are some exceptions. For most people, it's going to be super easy to calculate the High-3 average salary because we're going to just look at the standard form 50. If you look at a standard form 50 personnel action, block 20 Charlie says adjusted basic pay. So we just grab that right off the standard form 50 and use it. Again, some people are paid a little bit differently. So this is an annual salary, and for the GS, it's really simple. But if I am working as a DoD firefighter more than 40 hours in the week, or if I'm a WG, WL, WS hourly employee, we have to go one step further. We can't just look at the standard form 50, but we've got to figure out what to use for their High-3 average salary. So here you can see I've got a Department of Defense firefighter who's working 53 hours in the week. To compute the High-3 average salary, I've got to take their current pay, convert it to an hourly rate, and then multiply it by the number of hours that they're actually working. So there's an example here where the base pay plus locality is $2,756. The person's working 53 hours, as I said. So I'm going to multiply the hourly rate by that biweekly tour. Here, 72 hours in the biweekly pay period, base pay, $42,578. Taking that and dividing by their annual salary and dividing by that 2,756 hours gives me $15.45 an hour. $15.44 an hour times the 144 hours that they're working in that biweekly tour is going to give me the biweekly amount, and I multiply that by 26 because there's 26 pay periods in the year. So again, for those DoD firefighters, just one additional step. If you are a firefighter, you work for Department of Defense, you know that there's a chart that all of you share amongst each other where this has already been done. And you can just look on there and find that hourly rate. If you care where that came from, here it is. That's where that chart came from that you are all looking at. Okay, for those that are being paid by the hour, again, the WG, WL, WS, we take their hourly rate and multiply by the number of work hours in a year. So here's an example of a WL who's being paid $19.30 an hour. Multiplying that by 2,087 work hours in the year is giving me an annual pay of $40,279. And then I'll just take that and use that to calculate the High-3. So remember that I said there were 3 ways to do it. Simplistically, if you get the money every 2 weeks, it's going to count. We know there's some exceptions. Technically, we look at the regulation, we can see what's included, excluded. We know there are some special circumstances, and we've just talked about those. Factually, if I am your retirement specialist and you tell me that you're going to retire, what I'm going to do is get into your EOPF. That's your electronic official personnel file. It's where all your standard form 50s are housed. And I'm going to look at those 50s that impacted your pay for any reason and find the highest 3 consecutive years. And I'm just going to put this stuff in the computer. So it's going to populate a table just like you see here on your screen right now. Here is a person who decided that they were going to retire on December 31st of 2020. So the first thing I found in their folder was a GS pay rate adjustment that became effective on January 6, 2020. It's no more complicated than this, guys. I'm just looking at that standard form 50. It said the nature of action code changing the pay is this, and it took effect on this day. I'm just writing that down. Prior to getting their pay rate adjustment, this person had a within grade increase, and that took effect on April 12th of 2019. Before that, they had a promotion which took effect on April 14th of 2018. Before they had their permanent promotion, they had a temporary promotion. So anything that affects the pay is going to go on this table. So I wrote down the date of that temporary promotion, which here is January 4th, 2018. And then the last line of the table says remainder of the 3 years. It's a High-3. I can never work with less than 3 years. And as I was going backward in this person's records, they didn't have any more pay action. So I simply go to the date that gives me 3 full years to work with. Then, hey Ellen, how are you? Then I'm going to work from the bottom of the table toward the top. So if you look at the table there, I'm closing the remainder of the 3 years the day before you got your temporary promotion. And I'm closing the temporary promotion the day before the permanent one, closing that the day before the within grade, closing that the day before the general schedule pay rate adjustment, closing that on your selected retirement date. So that's giving me a period of time in column number 1, and that's going to be really important in just a second. Column number 2 is where I write down that annual adjusted basic pay. Again, GS, pay banded, grab it off your 50, WGLS, compute it, DOD firefighters, compute it, plug it into column number 2, whatever it is. Column 3, I'm giving you credit for the time that the money was in effect. So now those dates become really important. I'm going to go back to the first column. I'm going to compare every piece of time to 1 full year. Comparing the time to a year. So if you look at the top line, right, we had this pay rate adjustment that took effect on January 6th, and nothing happened until you retired on December 31st. You can easily see that that's almost a year. Look at column number 3. It's almost 1. So if you're interested, not everybody is, right? Some people just go, tell me approximately what it is. And if that's you, cool, you're good to go. We're done. Some people, Tiffany works with numbers all the time, right? So some people want to know exactly, like, no, how did you get it? I don't want to know what it's close enough. It's almost, what are you talking about? So let's just take 2 seconds and look at the next line here where I actually compare it to a year. So I set up a simple math problem. It's just subtraction, subtracting one date from the other. So I've written down my January 5th, 2020, and from that I'm subtracting April 12th of 2019. We have a quirky little rule in the HR world. If the days in that first block of numbers are not 31, we're going to add a day. So the first thing that I would do here is to change my 5 to a 6. I still cannot subtract 12 from 6. So what I'm going to have to do is borrow a month. So I'm going to change my 01 to an 00. When I borrow a month, it gives me 30 days to work with. So now that's going to become 36. 12 from 36 is 24. I cannot subtract 4 from what is now 0. So I'm going to have to borrow a year. I'm going to take my 2020 down to 2019. When I borrow a year, it gives me 12 months to work with. When I subtract, in this example, 4 from 12, I get 8. So the difference between those 2 dates on that second line, 8 months, 24 days. I'm comparing it to a year. So I've got to get it down to the smallest component, which are days. I take my 8 months. I know that OPM says that every month has 30 days, right? It's just a rule. You don't even have to think about it. Every month has 30 days. So if I've got 8 of them, 8 times 30 is going to give me 240 days. And I had that extra 24 days to bring down and add it in. That means the difference between these 2 dates in this example, 264 days. I'm comparing it to a year. 12 months in every year, 30 days in every month according to OPM. So 360 days in a year. I got the money for 264. 1 year is 360. When I divide 264 by 360, it gives me an answer of 0.733333% of a year. That goes in column number 3. That's the amount of time that the person was actually in the job with that money assigned to it. So the longer I sit there, people go, oh, what if I say a whole year? Well, then it's 1. What if I say a half a year? Then it's 0.5. But it's always going to be prorated by the amount of time that you were getting that money. Go across the table. If I'm still working with line number 2, then I can take this $60,092 and multiply it by the 0.73333% of time that I got it. That gives me the answer in the last column. And I'm going to do this for each line of my table. I'm going to add up that last column. That will tell me the total amount of salary over the 3-year period. Divide by 3. Round to the closest whole dollar. We don't use change when we calculate the High-3 average salary. That number is the second line of the computation for my retirement. Creditable service times that High-3 average salary, whatever it was, times my formula. And we'll talk about the formula in a different time. Talk about creditable service at a different time too. So that's what I wanted to bring to you tonight. And hopefully, that clarifies some things for you. Like I said, a lot of people get really confused about the High-3, don't really understand how it works. People want to tell me all the time that it's not all the money that you get, it's your base pay. No, it's not all the money that you get, but it's also not your base pay. It's basic. So please let me know if you have any questions. I'm so happy to see you stopping by, Tiff. You're so welcome. So happy to see that I've had a couple of people stop by live. Ellen, always great to see you as well. If you're watching it on the replay or you just haven't said hi, please let me know if there's anything I can help you with. I'm going to hop off. Have a great weekend, guys. Take care of yourself.